Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you.
Welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast. Today we have Doug Brewington, head girls coach at Genoa-Kingston. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I was looking at some of your previous episodes and all the names that you've had on. It's quite humbling and an honor to be here with you guys.
Oh, we love having coaches from all over the place on, and we can't wait to talk to you here. We want to start how we start every episode, just with the opening tip and you telling us kind of about your journey, where you started, as much as you want. Kind of give our listeners a little bit of background of you and where you're at, and then your program where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in general, basketball, growing up, basketball, like I played baseball and played football, but there was always something to do in between basketball season. So growing up, basketball was very much in my bloodline, so to speak. So played in multiple leagues, multiple AAU teams. It was kind of a bond that really tied my family. My brother and sister played. My dad played in college at IUPUI, and fell in love with the game. I went to a high school that was more of a football school, and I actually went that route for college. But once I got into college, I got my officiating license and refed and coached, rec and little kids stuff, and fell back in love with basketball. And that's kind of how the journey started, and now, kind of fast forwarding, I settled down, got married, moved to Illinois, kind of put athletics in the rear view, didn't really know kind of where that fell into my life. And my wife got a teaching job back at the school she went to at Hinkley Big Rock. And after a year or so, she got an email about the girls' job opening up, and I tried to convince her to apply, and she ended up talking me into it. And, I went in, applied, got an interview, and, the interview went really well, but, I had kind of lacked that high school basketball experience. So I didn't expect to get it, but the athletic director at the time, Bill Sandbrooks, he took a chance on me, and I'll always be in his debt and forever grateful for him for taking a chance for me. And that's kind of where it all started, 10 years ago. So as far as at HBR, like every other new coach, I thought I'd come in and outsmart everybody with my X's and O's, and quickly learned that, that I wasn't ready. But I was passionate, and I really cared, and I went to work. I got better, went to every clinic I could, read every book I could, absorbed every video I could find online, and reached out to other successful coaches in the area. I'd say that was a big one for me, and kind of picking their brain, learning how to build a program, run a program, all that stuff that you get, experience from being an assistant coach that I kind of skipped, so really reaching out to the coaching community, really helped me early on in my career for sure. And that kind of helped me realize, like, I put a plan together, and mine was, building from the bottom up, really honing in on youth development and getting touches with the middle school kids and building from there, building that passion piece and everything from the ground up, so that's kind of how we got started at HBR, and we went from there.
So you kind of started talking about your journey, which kind of leads us into this first one. So, you were a head coach at a school. For those that don't know Hinkley Big Rock, it's not the biggest school, we'll say. How about that?
Yeah.
But with about 100 girls, give or take. So maybe what were some of the challenges that to be a head coach at a school with only about 100 girls that maybe people wouldn't see? And then maybe what were some of the big pluses about being in a school that's kind of smaller, more tight-knit community?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, the first, like, I guess the challenges, retention is massive. When you only have 100 kids, 100 girls in the school, you've got, a third are athletes. And so that already chops you down to, about 30 kids to kind of pick from. And then they're all, spread out across multiple sports, so, retention was huge. And I feel like building relationships is important at every level you coach at, but especially so at the small schools. Like, I'd find myself buttering up mom and dad and grandma, whoever it took to get the kid to stay and come out, because, I know as coaches, we have that next man up mentality, but at a 1A school like that, the next man up may be a 5'1" freshman who is just coming out to the team to get out of PE, so it's not always viable. So definitely retention was priority number one. And in recruiting and selling the program to the elementary and middle school kids, like I said, getting down there in that youth development, but really selling it to them that, this is something you want to be a part of, something, that brings excitement to the community. Getting down there, we'd host clinics and camps for the youth kids. I mean, throughout the year, like just the last 2 days, we had a preseason camp for our middle school program. So getting down there and getting to work with them, and really selling it to them was kind of priority number one, because, all of a sudden you take a off season off, and you're not out recruiting, you get one freshman instead of five and sets the program back 3 or 4 years, so definitely that was the biggest challenge, but like I said, I attacked that by recruiting younger kids. I'd go to soccer games and recruit, soccer kids have good footwork, and get you out, come play a little defense, and so yeah, that aspect, was challenging, but at the same time, now, I'm coaching these kids in 4th grade at summer camps, throughout the year, and all of a sudden they come up and play for me, 6, 7 years later, and I know their mom and dad, I know their little sister, and I eat at their restaurant in town, and so it means more. It feels like it means more, when you have those familiar, ties, and so it's enjoyable, but it's definitely a challenge coaching at a small school.
Well, I think that's a great perspective there, because you see, I mean, John and I talk about all the time of the girls' game, especially basketball, is losing kids left and right. Every school you go to, you got these huge schools out by us that can't even get, full freshman teams. So I think that's a good lesson for some of the coaches of how to fix it. Like, well, you got to work it, right?
Absolutely.
You got to get in there and do what you can to get it done.
100%. Yeah, especially like with club volleyball, they're always plucking kids. You've got to battle. You can't just hope. Hope's not a strategy.
Yeah. So, you mentioned building from the ground up, when you took you maybe 4 or 5 years to get that 20-win season you were pushing for. During that process, kind of what did you learn about you as a coach? And then, with that, do you think it really took that 3 to 5 years to really establish your culture, right? And have the kids realize, like, hey, this is what we're doing. Because you talked about maybe, getting those younger kids getting in that pipeline of, okay, this is how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those first 3 or 4 years, it was a lot of me finding my identity as a coach, finding out what works, what doesn't. Like I said, you come in with a plan, and and you realize quickly, the game's not black and white, and so it's finding my footwork and building that culture piece. It's you always talk about, or as a coach, like selling the kids on wanting to be here, wanting to work hard, and at some point, throughout the season, you get to that. But my thought process was, if I can get to those kids at a young age, get those middle schoolers to look forward to being here, then all of a sudden, day one, they walk in and they're getting after it. They can't wait to be here, instead of me convincing them, after a season or two that this matters. So yeah, it all kind of came together in that regard, where all of a sudden, we've got freshmen coming in that they've been waiting for years to be a part of this, and really that, and all of a sudden when they get in here, they're pushing the juniors and seniors, and that really started to shift there for sure.
So I'm gonna follow real quick then. I think that's interesting too, because I don't know if that's like, how did you promote that vision, right? And like with parents, with your admin, other coaches, because I feel like a lot of times you come in somewhere and it's like instant gratification, right? Like, oh well, they didn't win enough games or this or that. They don't see like the progress you're making, maybe that you see as a coach.
Yeah,
Right. And then
absolutely.
there's a lot of outside factors of, oh, we're not doing well. We're not doing this. So how are you promoting that vision to maybe the outside people, right? The people that aren't quite in your program every day, but hey, yeah, we're making progress, or this is where we're going. How to get them to realize those things.
Yeah, so it's there are naysayers. All of a sudden you put in a couple losing seasons right off the bat, and you hear those whispers. And but one big thing was being present. Like I said, I go to the volleyball games. I'm at band concerts. Like I implemented and founded our theater program for the youth development. So like I was down there coaching. Like I coached the 7th and 8th grade team in their fall rec league. So they see the effort, but also, on our social media, we're constantly posting, photos and video clips of our middle school kids at camp or at games, and celebrating them. So they see, the behind the scenes, the sweat equity that we're putting in, and so you can kind of get the sense, that there's progress being made without necessarily seeing it, in the win column at the high school level, and yeah, the play increased, but it took some years to get those wins to tally up. But I think that there was excitement, especially at those younger ages that, we didn't, neglect or ignore the high school level, but yeah, I'd say, that was our main focus early on. And then it kind of just, became continuity, became expected.
I do think an interesting follow-up question for you is, we are in such a culture, as Todd said, and that was a really good question by Todd, but about that instant gratification. But how do we promote as maybe a coaching, easy for me to say, coaching community that, these things do take time. This establishment of it does take time. It's not 1 year sometimes. Sometimes it is 2, 3, 4 years. But I also feel like in today's day and age, man, if you have 3 bad seasons in some schools, you're out.
Right.
So how do we promote that a need of, hey, if you really want us to establish something real, it's going to take 2, 3 years of, as you said, just being present.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like with my interview with my new athletic director, that was one thing we talked about, and one thing that I made sure that he was on board with, and was that, I'm sure there are coaches that are better than me that are gonna come in and they can, find success early on with their fancy X's and O's, but it's just not who I am, like we build it from the ground up, and and kind of, work on the basics, and build it, from the youth aspect, like, we're competitive this year, and we're finding our own success. We've seen improvements from last season, but that was the pitch, that was the sell. It's like, this is a long-term project. I'm not coming here to have a winning season this year and hope for the best, like it's, having that, intentional conversation with my athletic director, making sure he was on board before, he brought me on or I agreed to come on, so it was a conversation that we had. So knowing I had that support system, is nice coming in, and so I would say, anybody with that mindset, of building, from the ground up, that, if you're interviewing for a job, make sure that's something you communicate. Because like you said, if, you have 3 losing seasons and you didn't, have that conversation with your athletic director about the long-term build, then, you could be, looking for a new job.
Well, you led us perfectly into this. So after 9 years, kind of what told you it was time for a new challenge? What were you kind of looking for? We had a previous guest who really liked when we dug into this topic, so I might dig a little bit. But let's start a little bit into, 9 years goes by, you're the coach of Hinckley Big Rock, you've had good success. Maybe let's start off with kind of what told you it was time for a new challenge.
Yeah, so I've coached in small school basketball, like we talked about. I mean, that community bond is awesome, and my wife played at Hinkley Big Rock. She teaches there. My kids go there, so it really was a tough decision, but it's one I weighed for a couple of years. Like we had success, and I wanted more, which is, I wanted more support from our athletic department. I wanted a bigger school atmosphere, where, not saying I need all the glitz and glamour of, nice equipment, but, stuff like that. I just wanted more more of a program than a team, and as much as we built and we fought and got that at HBR, at GK, I feel like there's not as much of a cap on our ceiling, and so, and it wasn't just anywhere, I wasn't just looking to go anywhere to coach anywhere, like we played against Genoa-Kingston, and I got to know the athletic director from, he'd come to our games, and when Genoa-Kingston played at HBR, and when I played at HBR at GK, he was there, and I got to know him and knew how much he valued the program and how much he valued athletics. So for me, it was finding the right fit, not just any fit. I didn't just want to go to a big school just to say I was a big school coach. I wanted to go somewhere where I knew somebody ahead of me in the athletic department was as passionate as I was. And luckily, I found that.
So now let's break this down even a little bit more. So now you've decided kind of in your mind over a couple of years, hey, this is something I'm looking for, but I want to try to find that right fit, as you said. Maybe what were some specific things you were looking for in that new program? And then this is a question I think that's always interesting. How did you know that Genoa Kingston was the program for you? Because I think, we as coaches, we think we're interviewing for jobs. I think sometimes we forget, hey, it's okay to interview them too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's like it was. It's like, I did my research, as far as knowing that Genoa-Kingston was the right fit. Like I said, I'm passionate, and I know that for an athletic director or a principal, I'm asking for this, I'm wanting that, like anything to improve the program, I get it can be a lot, and so knowing that, the athletic director, my leadership would be strong, my sport would be strong, so that was priority number one. And then secondly, I mean, Genoa-Kingston, I know they value, athletics in general. The football team's had success. Volleyball team won state, 2 years ago. And so I know it's a community that values athletics and pushes it, and so those were two high needs on my wish list, for the next job. And I think, Kingston checks both boxes really well.
So to kind of just piggyback on this, and John and I have talked about this too. Like, I mean, you've coached multiple sports, you've done a lot of things. You said you played, your dad and your family and your wife. Do you think, like at some point, especially now in today's culture, there's almost a cap on how long you can be somewhere because of maybe tuning out your voice or needing a refresh, not only for you as a coach, but maybe for a program or players. And I'm sure it depends on where you go, but John and I have had these conversations a lot of, like, maybe sometimes it's just time because
Right.
everybody needs like a new voice or a new perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially like living in the community that I coached, like, first 6, 7 years I was coach, I was Coach Brewington, but now all of a sudden, like I've got my daughter's friends and, family members and, and like, and people in the community that I see when I go out to eat. And so now all of a sudden it's just, I'm the community member that's coaching, you know what I'm saying? I'm not coach that they see in the community. So all of a sudden it's not necessarily your credibility drops, but it's, it's more of a, it's just, you're not coach anymore. You're, community guy. And which can be great. Like I said, it was nice, we're building those bonds and those relationships, but yeah, I do. I think it caps you, where, I see these kids out and about every day. I'd go into the gas station, after practice and I see a parent or a kid in there, and so, all that stuff's nice, but then at the same time, it does kind of weigh on me. Whereas now, I still live in Hinckley, but I'm coaching at Genoa and I can be as present as I want to be. But, there is separation, and where I'm there, I'm in town and I'm Coach Brewington, instead of their neighbor, and stuff. So for me, that's important. I think that it's kind of taken that cap off, that lid off for me. So I can see how some coaches fall in love with that, small town and staying in one school forever. But for me, I did see a cap on it, and that's ultimately, I imagine Kingston.
So, Coach, you had talked about your AD, and I think this is something else that coaches do need to look at when they when they're applying for specific jobs is kind of that vertical alignment between, the administration and the community members and the athletic director and even that, let's be honest, even the other head coaches in the school, are they willing to share athletes? Are they willing to work with you? So, maybe what are some of those things that you looked at specifically with Genoa-Kingston that, maybe this is a good, you've been a head coach for quite a while now. Maybe it's a young head coach. He's looking for his first, head coaching job. What are some of those things that he should be looking at as well?
Yeah, in fact, like I knew the head baseball coach at Genoa-Kingston, and so I interviewed him. I asked him straight up, what the atmosphere was like, what the athletic director, what their mentality was, and what the other coaches were like. And so I did. It's important for me. It was like you said, you're battling volleyball coach for kids. If you guys don't get along, I mean, all of a sudden, their third and fourth best volleyball player is playing basketball, and my third and fourth best basketball player is only playing volleyball. Problematic. At a 1A and 2A school. So, so yeah, I would say absolutely, it's something to inquire about. Even if it's just during your interview and you're talking to the athletic director, at least get a pulse for what that brings. And even my athletic director, was honest with me in the interview process on areas that that the building needed to improve on, and and hope that that my willingness to support multi-sport athletes would help influence others. So that was a big part of the interview process for me. Is finding that out, because like you said, if you're losing kids and you're splitting kids, all of a sudden no program is having success. So yeah, I would say as a first-time coach, these are questions you need to ask and kind of get familiar with. I know we're all anxious to get that first job, get that first win, and build your program. But if you're handcuffed along the way, it can set you back, for sure. And then all of a sudden, the next job's tougher to get.
So perfect lead in, two sport athletes. We kind of do our homework. I believe you're also a varsity volleyball coach, right?
Yep.
And coaching basketball at the same time, which is a combination you don't really see a lot. Because, like boys, maybe you see football, basketball, but I personally, I don't know about John, but I haven't seen that combination or heard, sometimes it's a spring sport, sometimes it's just basketball. But how did you, with that perspective, I guess you're talking about sharing athletes with, especially on the girls' side, right? It's a big thing at lots of these schools. How did that kind of help your perspective of, working with other coaches and putting that plan together to have both programs be successful, and like you said, not be like, oh, now all of a sudden they start leaking over here, and because I personally think, I played three sports in high school, and my basketball coach was also a football coach or a baseball coach or whatever, so everybody was willing to say, hey, okay, in the summer you got to leave football a little bit early to go to basketball, and this, that, and the other, and find that balance. So how did you kind of use that perspective to work with your other coaches to make it work for everyone so all the programs could be successful?
Yeah, so when I first got into volleyball, like it was kind of by accident. Like, so our head coach at the time didn't have a fresh off or JV coach going about 2 weeks into the season. And and I pulled her aside and I was like, look, I was like, I don't know the game at all. I was like, but I know how to coach, and I'm willing to learn. And I was like, so if you can't find anybody, I'm willing to step up and help you out at the lower levels. And the next day I get a call from the AD, and my name was on the approval list for the board. So it happened quick. As far as getting involved in volleyball. And it was a little, like I said, it's a humbling experience. Learning the game on the fly. And when I was honest with the girls, up front, and told them that look, we're going to learn together. And but so it was nice to be welcomed into her program, knowing that, hey, like, you may be battling for kids and all that. So it was nice for the head volleyball coach to welcome me as the basketball coach into her program. And I think that really helped kind of the two programs, like learn to share the kids and learn to, really vibe together. And then when ultimately she stepped down and I took over the program, it's funny, we'd have open gyms, and I've got, for basketball, and I got a girl who's, she says she's struggling with her sets. And so I've got the volleyball net set up on one side of the court, and I've got 5 or 6 girls, getting jump shots in on the other side. So, So it was a unique experience, for sure, and really helped me grow as a coach. Just the two games are so different. Like with basketball, you can make up for a lot with energy and effort. But on the volleyball court, you can't hide anybody, and your fundamentals have to be on point. So it's kind of learning that aspect of coaching. Is it helped me become a better coach and as far as that goes. But as far as the kids learning to play, multiple sports and learning to balance the time, it helps when, your coach is the head coach for both. And, we can find the time, split the time, and I'm always understanding if a kid's missing a volleyball workout over the summer to go get extra shots up, so yeah, it really helped in that regard. And then when I eventually stepped down from volleyball, just it is too much. It's a lot being the head coach of two programs. I'm trying to build them both up. When I stepped aside, I had a really good assistant coach that I felt comfortable with handing the reins to, and she ended up being the head coach in volleyball and ended up being my assistant coach in basketball. So we blended the worlds really well together in those two sports there for sure.
All right, so we're kind of halfway point before we switch to like the main topic here, call this halftime adjustments. I just wanted to get like for our listeners and for us, like what's your basketball style, right? Right? Like what do you, if you had your druthers, this is what we're gonna do, your non-negotiables. But then how do you kind of blend your style with what your team does well and it has skills at, because your style could be great, but you might not have. All right, every year it's a little bit different, right? So how do you kind of, what you believe in and then mesh that with what you have that given year?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially coaching a small school basketball. Like, I mean, you have to be flexible. You have to be creative. Like there are staples that we carry over year to year, and that are staples of the program. Like we want aggressive defense. And some years that may be a half court trap. Some years that may be full court man. Depending on our athleticism and but we want to get after and we want to be aggressive on defensively. So that's the staple. But it can change year to year depending on our athletic situation or our skill set. So we do have those basic staples, but yeah, we'll change it year to year for sure, based on what we have. Like there's years where, my best player, my best scorer is a shooter, and we'll run it off 2 or 3 screens. The next year it's a slasher, and then the following year it's a 6 foot post player, and so it'd sure be nice to be able to, hand it over year to year and, have that similar continuity, but at a small school, you kind of, have what you have, and you got to learn to make the most of that, and that's something that I think that we figured out, after year 4 or 5. My first 2 years we had a really good player, and so I built everything around everybody else, thinking she's going to get hers, and and we'll run all our sets and all our offense based on everybody else, and and I learned from that mistake, and if you got a workhorse, you ride it, and so being able to change, style year to year is critical for the small school. But as far as my preference, yeah, we want to push tempo. Like kind of the Mark D'Antonio, 8 seconds or less offense. Like I want to push tempo, get up the court, get a good shot and play defense. That's what I want to spend most of our time on the defensive end, causing some havoc and creating chaos. So that'd be my preferred style. And most years we find a way to do that. Like I said, whether it's a 2-2-1 press, or this year we're running kind of almost a Grinnell style defense where we're trapping the ball at all times for 32 minutes. So it does change year to year, but having those staples, is important too.
Well, he just said Grinnell, so now all the system people that listen to us up, they're going to start listening now. So just because this is the first episode of kind of the new year, we're kind of just going to do a little bit of a head coach potpourri here, where we got just a variety of topics. I know you had sent us some topics, and we kind of moved this show around those topics. But I think these are all just interesting things that, head coaches should think about. If you're a young assistant and you want to be a head coach, things they should think about. So obviously for any head coach, one of the biggest things is playing time. Every kid wants to play. And your substitution rotation matters. And I don't actually think in the 120 episodes or so we've really dug into this topic. So, in a pregame, do you have a substitution pattern in your head? Is it pretty consistent throughout the year? obviously there's, games where you're blown out or you blow someone out where, that might be tweaked. But what's your substitution pattern like in your mind? Obviously, playing the style you do, similar to myself, you play a lot of kids, I'm guessing. But what kind of goes into the rotation for you?
Yeah, so in this, I'll be honest, this is still an area I struggle with or needed the most improvement, and I feel like every year it's gotten better and every year it's changed, like there's one year, I think my third season, I think we made 18 substitutions on the season. Like we went over half our games going 5 strong, 0 subs. And that was just, like, again, like at that point we were building the program and growing and that's what we needed to do, and it's a tough sell, and it's not ideal situation. And I've grown from that and gotten better and the programs and the teams I've coached have gotten better. And, so it's still an area that I work on and improve on, but I feel like this year we've seen a lot of the playing time grumps and pains, kind of fall to the side because we have had a plan. And this year, we let pretty much every kid on the bench know what time you're going in and who you're going in for right off the bat, so that way, they're more engaged, they're focusing on the kid that they're going in for, and when it's their time, they're ready, and in other years I haven't done that because, hey, we may be rolling and I don't want to mess this up, and this year I've decided that, we need to incorporate that depth better and trust those kids a little more. And we've seen positive results from it. Like the kids are more engaged when, like I said, when they come in, they're ready because they know they've been watching the kids they're guarding. They know their responsibility. So in that regard, we have seen a lot of good improvements, and it's like our 6th, 7th man know, hey, at the minute 30 mark, you're checking in for her and her. So we've seen that positive trend, and also at practice, I tell you that all of a sudden the 7th and 8th, 9th man, they know their minutes are coming and they know their minutes matter. So their effort at practice and their buy-in has been better. And so, for me, that's been, I'd say, my biggest accomplishment this year is seeing that improvement and learning that, that role and that matters, so yeah, getting organized there has been a struggle for me to, but also it's been a relief,
I'm going to kind of tie this in with, what we talked about here at halftime adjustments, but, like you said, the game, it's always evolving, right? Your players, you have your style, but how do you go about like assessing that come the off season, right? Okay, we had this year, or, this person graduated, we got this new player coming up. Especially offensively, right? Like you got to find different ways, and there's all kinds of, skills, like you said, posts or shooters. So what is your process of, okay, we had this year, now I'm looking at these kids. How do you maybe start in the summer or the spring to get to where you are come fall, and this is what we're doing?
Yeah, so in fact, I look 3, 4 years ahead. Like, so I've got freshmen and sophomores now that are getting valuable minutes, but I know, hey, our primary ball handler and our leading scorer this year is our lone senior, and I know it's going to be different next year, and so in a lot of the stuff we do at practice, we're building the secondary ball handlers. We know, hey, this kid's going to need to contribute next year, and so while we're building, this year, it's all in the back of your mind, knowing that, this kid's gonna have to take a big step up next year. So we got to give her more minutes this year, or we got to work on this at practice. So we really lay that out, 3 to 4 years ahead of time, so like next year we have an idea of what our identity is going to be, or who's going to be, our go-to kids and stuff. And obviously there's always nice surprises when this kid steps up and you didn't expect it, and you can reevaluate. But so, going into each season, we have the primary objective of this season and finding success, but we also have those smaller, goals and tasks of improving kids to this regard. And then as soon as the season ends, we kind of start penciling in X's and O's, like we said, there are staples, zone offense here that we keep and the man offense we keep, but all of a sudden we're gearing it more towards a shooter, or we're, adding the extra sets. And so we'll start penciling all that in the spring, so we don't have sets for 3 or 4 years out, but skill sets, we have an idea that we start building around. And once off season rolls around, we really get organized, and summer is important to us. As much as we change year to year, as far as what we do. We use the summer as another season. We are really working on, okay, is this viable? Can we find success running this like we envisioned? And so our summer season, we really attack and we take it serious.
So I guess I'll follow then. I like that idea of play. Maybe like say your lower level, are you maybe doing something a little bit different with those kids that you might not be doing on your varsity, knowing that this is best for them? Or are you trying to stay consistent like with the same kind of things from year to year, you know? You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, so like, yeah, we won't, like, if all of a sudden I think next year we're gonna, press all 32 minutes full court man, and we're gonna chuck up a lot of threes, and if that's not who we are this year, we're not necessarily working on that, throughout the season. But we may get in extra shots, or kids have a way of becoming what you tell them they are, so we'll pump up a kid that, hey, you're working on your shot, working on your shooting, it's coming, and all that. And so communicating that vision with the kids, and we don't make promises, but telling them, we're honest with them, and we tell them straight up, like, yeah, here's the plan, here's the future, here's what we envision this year and next year, and so we do communicate that well with the kids, but we do find a balance. Like, it's, we're not overlooking anybody's senior year for next year. You know what I'm saying? We're making the most of what we can this year, but we do find a little balance. And like, we do a lot of small sided games where, it's, building, development as far as, okay, yeah, and so it's just scrimmaging at practice and letting our leading scorer dominate, the JV. We're going 2-on-2, 3-on-3, showing these kids, different skills that they'll be using, if not this year, next year. And so just overall basketball IQ and player development.
So I think a big part of the job that maybe gets overlooked is just that constant evaluation. And this could be off season, this could be the middle of the season, but it's kind of just evaluating, your assistant coaches, evaluating your players. Are they developing the right way? Evaluating your system. Let's be honest, at least I do this for sure, evaluating sometimes yourself. Am I doing the right things? Am I changing something here? Should I not be changing something here? What's your process for just maybe evaluating all the different people in your program, whether it's assistant coaches or players or yourself?
Yeah, so we'll do like, mid-season check-ins, like, oh, here over Christmas break, like, we've got practice tomorrow. We'll pop in with, with 2 or 3 kids, one at a time, and that's where we kind of give our evaluation feedback, but so leading up to the season, basically every weekend, we'll sit down and, either myself or with an assistant coach, and kind of evaluate the progression. If is this kid giving us the minutes, or the quality minutes that we anticipated, is there a shot coming along, or are we giving shots to a kid shooting 10%, and we got to reevaluate. So every weekend there's downtime, and some weekends, I dive into every possible aspect. I watch 3 or 4 games, and and I over critique, and there are others where you're just kind of brainstorming while you're watching cartoons with the kids, so it does fluctuate, as far as how in depth the evaluation process goes. But as you guys know, as head coaches, like, we're constantly evaluating, constantly rethinking things, and so for me, we do have formal stuff where we'll fill out, stuff twice a year, usually, like, like I said, towards mid-season and towards the end of the year, and, what we expect you to look like next year, what, how things went this year. And so we do give those kids that feedback. And, as coaching staff, we do meet, and because I'm not always right, like my assistant coach may point out, hey, this kid isn't scoring, but, they're keeping kids off the glass. They're holding their score down. And so it's nice to have, your trust in your assistant coaches to bounce those ideas off of, and really, especially at the lower levels where, I see games, and, in the occasional practice, we're in the same gym, but we're on 2 different courts, so I don't have my hands on it as much as I like, and so really putting your trust in them and knowing that we're on the same page is critical.
All right, so let's get into the loaded question of all head coaches is figuring out your schedule and balancing that, because I feel like that takes up a lot of time every year too. Um, Right, you play in a great conference, right? You got Stillman Valley, you got Dixon, Byron, Rockford Lutheran, right? For coaches that are listening, they should go check out the really good basketball, right? They might not know about those teams, but it's really, really good basketball. How do you, and we kind of talked a little bit about your schedule this year, right? Where you didn't do anything over Christmas. So how do you find a balance with tournaments and non-conference schedule, especially knowing that pretty consistently your conference is a really, really tough, really quality conference. One, to challenge yourself as a team and get ready for the postseason, kind of which is the ultimate goal, right? And two, not be so overloaded that you're kind of hurting things along on the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. You absolutely have to find balance, like, early on, especially, coming to a new school, you may want to find some success elsewhere because, your conference is going to be loaded, and so, but at some point, we got to compete and beat those teams. And to do that, you got to have a tough non-conference schedule as well to get you ready for those games. So it is finding a balance, and I think, like our current, schedule is pretty tough, especially early on, the first half of the year, and so I feel we're battle tested, we're ready, but at the same time, you don't want 30, dog fights, because all of a sudden you come into the postseason and man, you're beat down, you're wore out. And so it is important finding that balance, and I'm glad that like I want to get in the Christmas tournament. I'm looking into one, I talked to my AD about it. Because one, you play schools you don't normally play, and it lightens up the rest of the year. Instead of playing 3 games a week, if we get 4 or 5 games over Christmas break, now we get a couple of weeks with 2 games, where we can game prep a little bit better. And so finding that balance for this year, it really was a blessing having that week off where we were all kind of able to recharge and get healthy and kind of reevaluate, like we tweaked some things, and going into this week. So for this year, it's been good, kind of coming into a new program. But next year, I think, we'll be a little more established, like as far as, knowing each other and what expectations are and all that. And so the next year, my goal is to get into a Christmas tournament somewhere. But yeah, it is important, finding that balance, and it's like, every year at HBR, the first 21 season we had, it was, I wouldn't say fluff, but we wanted to find success, teach the girls how to win, and every year after that, all of a sudden, we're playing ranked teams, in the top 10, and we're still finding that success, and so like we didn't see a giant spike in our win total, but all of a sudden the quality of the wins are better. So it is finding that balance and knowing who you have and what your goals are, to balance that schedule out.
So, as we get into our final 2 segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's your opportunity to kind of discuss, run the show yourself. You could talk about yourself or your family or your program or something you want our listeners to know, or you could turn the table on Todd and I and ask us a question. As we like to say, there's no referee in your timeout saying your 30 seconds is up. It's a loose 30 seconds. So, kind of the floor is yours.
All right. So I would say, especially for young coaches, like when I came in, I viewed every opposing coach as the opposition and the enemy. I mean, I was kind of mean, but like I didn't build those relationships with other coaches. So I would say, find a coaching community and build one. Reach out to other coaches on Twitter. Go to catching that game with another coach. Finding a mentor, getting to know other coaches. I've got a couple coaching friends that I bounce ideas off of, and half the time we're talking each other off the ledge after the loss, and so I would say as a coach is important, really it's taking it from a job to a lifestyle for me, what I'm saying? Like, finding friends and reaching out, and it's helped me grow. I've reached out to some successful coaches, in the area and bounce ideas off them, pick their brain, and it's made me a better coach, and now all of a sudden I look forward to those Christmas hospitality rooms, and in the postseason conference meetings, it's an opportunity, just reach out to other coaches, and like I said, they can help you can help them. I'd say it's important. It's the job's what you make of it, and I feel like you're missing out if you keep your circle too tight.
I think that's how you ended up on the show today, isn't it, Coach?
Absolutely, 100%.
I mean, let's be honest. I think a big determining of the Christmas tournament should be the hospitality room. I mean, that we gotta
Amen.
You gotta get some hospitality. I mean, that's a factor. You gotta be like, hey, I
Absolutely,
got a
man. A good
game.
spread.
We gotta have a good spread, you know. All right, going in our last segment here, quick hitters, just kind of rapid fire, maybe sometimes random questions, just having some fun. All right, so the best part of playing high school basketball in Indiana.
So the crowds in the community, like I don't think Indiana basketball is better than Illinois basketball, but it's life or death there. Like, they closed down the gas stations, the restaurants, like the entire town is closed and they're at the game. Like you can go into, a farm school that's 3 and 15 and sure enough, there's going to be 3 or 4 thousand people there to cheer them on. So that was the best part for me is every game going in, it felt like the playoff atmosphere.
All right. So you had mentioned, going to so and so where they have their own restaurant. Mom and Dad have maybe what's some hidden places to eat in both Hinckley and Genoa?
Yeah, so I know every adult has their favorite barbecue spot. So I won't say it'll be your absolute favorite, but I'll tell you it'll be your number two. In Hinckley, we have South Moon Barbecue. And I mean, the atmosphere is awesome. They had decor like 80s collectibles, like the old wrestling
Yep.
figures and comic book stuff everywhere, but the barbecue's fantastic. So if you're in Hinckley, it's an absolute must stop.
Oh yeah, I've been actually been there multiple times. It's kind of like in between with my wife's family. We'll go there for event. It's a great place.
Is it?
It's
Yeah, see, yep, yep.
really good.
And then
Really.
up in the Genoa-Kingston area in Kingston, the best burger in town, right? There's 5 Points Pub there in Kingston. Burgers are phenomenal. So if you ever come and check out one of our games, swing in there afterwards for a burger.
All right. Your kind of thoughts on, I guess, the new basketball in Illinois, the rule changes, kind of evolving. Took a while for us to get to some of it, but kind of your thoughts on where it is now and where we're going in Illinois in high school basketball.
Yeah, so it was funny when the rule changes as far as free throws, and going straight into the double bonus, it's kind of like I didn't have an opinion on it, but now that it's here, like I'm a big fan. I think
I
it is
love it.
a nice change, and
Yeah.
in one, like, hey, if you're at two fouls in the second quarter, you can get aggressive in the final 2 minutes, and like just it's a nice change. I've liked that aspect. The shot clock coming. It won't affect our play a whole lot. We like to play fast, but in the game situations are going to change. So, one thing that worries me about it is, the beauty of high school basketball is the variety of play. You go to Amboy and the Kraken's going to run the flex and sit in a 2-3 and is that pace of play gonna win out, or is your up tempo press, so I like the variety of play. I worry the shot clock may alter that to where, like in college, everybody plays a similar style, and so I worry about that, but at the same time, I'm excited for it, so anxious to see where it goes. But overall, I think basketball is in a good place. It's just getting, and high school sports are cyclical. I think at some point basketball will return to king over volleyball, at least that's the hope. But as far as the actual gameplay, I think we're in a good spot right now.
I couldn't agree more, by the way, on the free throws. I love that it resets every quarter now. I didn't know how I would feel about it, but the whole you're in the bonus in the middle of the first quarter, and now you have to be in the bonus until halftime. I'm so happy with it.
Yeah, I could, yeah, 100%. Like it was, like I said, you said I didn't have an opinion on it, but now that I've experienced it, yeah, it's a very nice change for sure.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, like, so obviously coaching at Benedictine, the women's have different rules than the men. So like, I'll watch a men's game the other day, and like both teams were in like the double bonus with like 8 minutes left in the first half. I'm like, oh gosh, this is gonna be the longest half ever. Like it's just free throw fest, and it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to like adjust the thinking. You forget, right? Because you're every game we reset. We got
Right, yeah.
you can advance the ball, right? Whereas the men's game you can't necessarily. So yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. That's a rule that maybe everybody should look at.
All right, a fun one. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I gotta get in better shape. I played in a 3-on-3 tournament this last weekend, and and everybody in the league, everybody in the tournament was 25 and under, so it was a little humbling experience. But and then only having 9 kids on our varsity team, whenever JV's not there, I got to step in and practice with them a little bit. And, and I can feel father time beating down on me a little bit. So that's my New Year's resolution, get in a little bit better shape, help out in the basketball court a little bit more.
A basketball superstition as a player or a coach?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like, always and forever in gonna make, I'm sure every coach or every player has that one, but even we ran, like I said, we ran a middle school camp the last 2 days, and and I was trying to teach that to them, like, hey, before you leave, you put one in the basket, and I do the same thing, and and so that's a big one. And then as far as coaching goes, the opening tip, I'm seated. I enjoy the tip, and those are the only 3 seconds that I'm on the bench and I'm up and moving around the rest of the game. But for whatever reason, that's kind of a tradition of mine is I have a seat and enjoy the tip, and then I'm up and at it.
All right, and then the last one is maybe a favorite activity you do in your free time to kind of reset yourself.
Yeah, so I've got 2 kids. I have a 7 and an 11-year-old. My daughter is, it's funny, like, so I coach basketball. Basketball's pretty much been my whole life. My wife played in college and, was a 1,000-point scorer at Hinkley Big Rock, and neither of my kids have any interest in basketball. And so it's funny how that worked out, but, it's, we just, hey, find your passion. You don't have to follow in our footsteps. And so for my daughter, it's creativity and artsy. So like I'll go into her bedroom and sit on the floor, and she'll show me her hundreds of drawings and tell me every character's backstory. And so just finding solace in her passion or supporting her passion is nice. And then my son, 7, and he's autistic, and his memory and sense of humor is just, I mean, he's a sweet, kind kid, but his memory and his sense of humor is fantastic. Like he's got hundreds of jokes locked and ready for you. So him and I, and he'll tell me his jokes over and over, and he's kind of like an engineer mindset where he's hands-on. So we'll build Legos and forts and Rube Goldberg apparatus and stuff. So really getting time with the kids, and it's nice because their passion is not mine, so it doesn't feel like work, or it's like, okay, that's my opportunity to step away from the basketball world and see the world through their eyes.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you being on today. This was an excellent episode. I think people are going to learn a lot about just the intricacies that go into being a head coach. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.